Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to this much anticipated Back to Basics workshop. I've been seeing some questions online, some quite interesting questions. Hopefully, by the end of this presentation, we'd have been able to answer those questions and have you in the know. Today, we talk about the intricate world of relationships, both at home and also while you're on the hustle. I could ask a question right now, to be or not to be. For those persons who know literature, I think this was in Hamlet, right? To be or not to be, one of those Shakespeare plays. We're asking a sort of question like that this afternoon when I say hitch or hike. We're talking about relationships. And for some of us, we might be standing at a crossroad and we're filled with curiosity as it relates to this topic. But today, through our presentations, we'll be hopefully helping you to navigate the complexities and the connections of what we are doing. So this workshop is not going to be a passive experience. So for all those who are at home and are tuned in, get ready to be very interactive with what's happening here. On my table here, I have some prizes, plus there are some other surprises coming up. So stay tuned for all of that. First, let me welcome those who are tuned in, those who are able to see my hands doing like this. That means you're watching on one of our streaming platforms. Maybe you are watching over on YouTube at NCO TV Jamaica, or you're also watching online on YouTube at Watch EJC Live. Good evening and welcome. We also have those who have registered for the workshop. Those individuals who have registered for the workshop, you've gotten a special link to tune in. Now, for those who use that special link, and if you're viewing the workshop via that special link for a certain amount of time, at the end of it, you'll be receiving certification to say, yeah, you were at this workshop. Plus, I'm going to try to work out something for you that you can get a copy of it at the end of it all. We also want to welcome those who are listening live on air, NCUFM 91.1, 91.3, and 91.5. Ladies and gentlemen, fasten your seatbelts. It's time for us to delve into this very complex, yet a topic that we're going to try to simplify as much as possible for you. Without further ado, let us begin this extraordinary adventure. Welcome to our Back to Basics workshop.
To introduce our esteemed guest, Dr. Lorraine Vernal. Dr. Vernal is a remarkable individual with a profound background. Currently serving as the Director of Women's, Children, and Adolescent Ministries at the Jamaica Union Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, Dr. Vernal holds a Doctor of Philosophy in Conflict Analysis and Resolution from Nova Southeastern University. Her diverse expertise encompasses teaching, mediation, and serving as a Justice of the Peace. Dr. Vernal's ministry is deeply rooted in her passion for helping individuals realize their potential through the transformative power of Christ. She is a tireless advocate for the disenfranchised and voiceless, inspiring others to do the same. With over 3 decades of marriage to Elder Michael Vernal, Dr. Vernal brings a wealth of experience to the table. Their family has expanded to include 2 adult daughters and the joy of being grandparents to Elena. In her session today, Dr. Lorraine Vernal will be sharing insights on addressing communication and understanding between genders, exploring individual perspectives in relationship dynamics, identifying red flags and signs of a deteriorating relationship, discussing healthy conflict resolution versus harmful patterns, and recognizing when to salvage or move on. We are truly honored to have Dr. Lorraine Vernal with us today, and her expertise promises to be enlightening as we explore these critical facets of interpersonal relationships. Welcome.
Us in studio, as you heard, Dr. Lorraine Vernal. But before we get to this presentation, I want you to know that while you're listening to the presentations, whatever platform you're watching on, you can go ahead and ask your questions. For those of you who are listening on air, send them to our WhatsApp line, 457-1414. We have producers all over the building. We'll be curating the questions and we have a question and answer segment. Dr. Vernal, I'm ready to learn about relationships. I have a reason I want to learn about relationships. Yes.
Okay, so hello everyone. Hitchhike. What are you going to select? Are you ready for the journey? Interpersonal relationships. Wow, such an exciting, but it can be very complex. And where I sit, sometimes I get the calls. Sometimes, persons are distressed, they're overwhelmed, and they're just trying to navigate life. And so I start off by asking individuals, and I'm asking everyone, if Jesus visited you or your home, would he see love displayed? And many times when I speak to couples, I will ask them, why did you pick that person? Of all the possibilities, sometimes they take a long time to respond, and sometimes the responses are, very quick. But I love to start with the fact that we are made in the image of God. And I love this quotation by Ellen G. White from Christ Object Lessons, page 194, which basically says, every soul, however degraded by sin, is in God's sight accounted precious. As the coin bears the image and the superscription of the reigning power, so man at his creation bore the image and superscription of God. And though now marred and dimmed through the influence of sin, the traces of this inscription remain upon every soul. God desires to recover the soul and to retrace upon it his own image in the righteousness and holiness. I ask individuals who are planning for, relationships, or in relationships, who are even thinking of leaving their relationships, that we need to be more intentional and preventative in our approach. And what do I mean? There are many resources. Now, don't think that Dr. Vernon has it packed. I'm still learning. I am married 30 many years, and sometimes I don't even remember how many years, but my husband will remember. So here I'm sharing some sources. Adventist Family Ministries, the Olivers have prepared a lot of information. I just recently had the awesome privilege of sitting at the feet of Dr. Anthony Gordon, who just recently sent out a book. He looks at relational health, and it's awesome, his approach. We have Dr. Roy Dennis, who is our own family ministries director at JAMU. He and his wife just released a book which looks at premarital counseling. And we can't just only look within our context. Look at persons like Dr. Herbert Gale, who looks in terms of being an anthropologist. He uses history. He looks at how we are in terms of being Jamaicans, and for wherever you are, there are other persons. He looks at the Caribbean in general. And there are many programs. One example is Prepare Enrich, which looks at preparing for marriage and enriching marriages. Now, one of the things the Olivers have pointed out is that people who are intentional about communicating well with their loved ones experience great family relationships. And this is undergirding what I just said about being intentional. If you want your family relationships to be healthy and positive, it is important to learn to communicate with grace. And we say grace, we are talking about the spiritual concept that refers to the unmerited favor and love freely given by God. If you notice, I'm showing you that relationships that are grounded in what God intended will find that they have a little, if you want to say, a little head start in terms of getting their relationships. And I'm putting my disclaimer up front, Mr. Michael. The choice is going to be yours. And I'm saying this because there have been people who have come to the office who have made calls, and then this is it, Michael. Sister Vernal said,
yes.
Pastor Tinder said, no. If you're in a relationship, you must take responsibility for the choices that you're going to make. It's not somebody else's choice, and that is what some people do. You see that the man is going after your child, and any situation you hear me talking about, I know of one. And you are wondering if you should stay with that man who is doing all he can to get into your daughter's room. God has blessed us with sense. God shows us, so we have to, in the end, take responsibility. But this, we start at the beginning. In Genesis, we saw where God put man and woman, and you notice man and woman together. And this is where God wanted us as we find on the fundamental beliefs of marriage, and this is displayed on the General Conference's website, and for those who don't know, the Seventh-day Adventist Church headquarters, it says, created in God's image, male and female, we are designed to live in relationships. And that is why individuals who are not in relationships sometimes yearn. That is how God made us. Marriage is God's ideal to live in harmony and for children to grow up in security and love. And within this context, there should be mutual love, honor, respect, and responsibility, which are the fabric of the relationship, which should reflect love, sanctity, closeness, and the permanence of the relationship between Christ and his church. If we see our relationships as founded upon God and acknowledge the importance of devotion to God, because sometimes, even for those who are still basking in the overglow of the afterglow of a brand new relationship.
Honeymoon phase.
The honeymoon phase and nice can done. If there is not the love of Jesus in you and you are trying to get to church, my brother, to go and do something, you're trying to get somewhere and this lady is there taking hours to do, and you're just saying, oh, Jesus, give me the love that I need. You're going to find that there are going to be times when you're going to look beyond the individual because of the love that you have with God to help you to address certain relationships. When you're told awful things, and some men have to be dealing with certain things, I tell my ladies, we don't bash men. We love our men. We affirm our men. And so there are many women, we are just takers. Valentine's Day, we only think that we could, we're looking for the big basket or the big thing that is coming to the office so everybody can see how much, and the basket size determines how much he loves you. That's what some people think. But some persons never ever yet think, what can I do for him? For this person who is always showing me love. So it's not a one-sided thing. And when those things happen, relationships get into trouble. Now, I love this quotation. It says, a well-orchestrated wedding does not guarantee a lasting and happy marriage. Nearly 40, and this is steeped in research, nearly 40 to 50% of all first-time marriages will end in divorce. Now, I have spoken to couples, and sometimes, you go to weddings and you see it. Some persons are just into the wedding. The dress is coming from Paris, and we don't want any children to mess up the video because they're going to make noise. The focus is on the wedding. You can do a wedding in a little room, and lots of love is there. Let the priority not be, let them see that my shoes was this, my dress was this, and look at the bridal party. Another thing too, as an organization and into family ministries and having to deal with the stresses and the challenges that come with getting married, and we're talking about those who are planning for marriage, many times individuals go to the pastor with the date, the bridal party, the church, the reception area, place, everything. All they need for the pastor to say is, yes. That does not work like that. The church suggests that we do what is called 6 months, and I call it this, 6 months of pre-date. Marital counseling. Yes. Because many people only see it as the day, but relationships are much more about that. So for those who are thinking, and one of the challenges of those who are already married, marriage is not about, you can go and go back for you're changing this model because this one not working out. That's not how it works. So those of you who are not yet into that type of relationship, you need to find out about the opposite sex. Find out about men if you are a female. Find out about women. And, sometimes I hear some men, we can't bother with the talking. Leave women alone. Most women like to talk. So if you can't bother with the talking thing, I think you should just go and hold your corner until you're ready for the talking thing. Because most times, that's how women express themselves. You have some men who will do it. So find out about the person. If you plan to marry, educate yourself about topics such as temperaments, family backgrounds. Oh, yes, we have had persons going to Bellevue to get to or some institution to check out the docket of the person they're getting married to, because it's after they get married to the person, they realize that the person has an issue. You need to talk. You need to learn things about forgiveness, marriage, health issues, which can tear a relationship apart. Sexuality. Almost every list about conflict, and we're going to see it soon, that three-letter word is on it on the list. Parenting, budgeting, conflict resolution. Be the right one. Many times there are persons who are seeking a partner and they want the right one, but they are not the right one. Cultivate your spiritual foundation and personality. Some of us personalities want a lot of prayer and fasting. Yes, because we are rough. And the reality is we are molded by our backgrounds, our families, everything that impacts us. Improve your interpersonal skills. Some people tell you they can't find anybody in Jamaica to marry because they don't talk to people. Duh. It's not going to work. It's not magic. You have to get to know people, and people will need to get you. So work on your skills. Meet people. Go to different places. Have friends on both sides. Appreciate the value of solitude. If you think that getting into a relationship is the cure for loneliness, you're going to be in trouble. And so some quick questions, the Olivers, and I'm using their resource material. Do you have the same or similar traits that you're seeking from a mate? Are you ready to meet the same needs in the other person? Some people are going into a relationship and they're planning it's a one-sided thing, and that's what's happening to some marriages. In what ways do you see yourself dependent on the other person? Are you expecting your future spouse to build or enhance your self-esteem? Are you prepared to build theirs? Because he will have needs and she is going to have needs. So you can't go into a relationship and you're all about yourself. And ladies, don't spend your whole time in the relationship trying to turn the man into a woman. Wanting him to behave like you, want to think like you, want to understand like you. That's what I mean by that. So he asks you a question. So he figures everything is okay because men tend to be more logical. Use any theory, whether you want to use the Mars or they are from Venus or you want to use other theories. There are so many that are there. But men, you need to learn to understand women. Women are not men, all right? And so we're going to have challenges. True love is a decision that you have to make every single day. You must have realistic dreams. And what I'm already saying here, you must have, for those who are planning to get married, and we must acknowledge that we're going to have relationships that are just friends. And we're not talking about any friends with benefits and no Netflix and chill and all them things, which are some of the things that people are doing and just having all sorts of sex and all sorts of things. And whenever you get intimate, you are connected in such a way that God intended for individuals who are married, all right? So work on it. What influences how you see things? Sometimes a couple, you're wondering what they're worrying about. Individuals see things differently, and all of us are shaped by our family backgrounds, our own experiences, our own expectations. And one researcher showed that many of the challenges we have in relationships is because of expectations. Here's another, many people use the 5 love languages and say we need to know you. I'm not endorsing, and I draw from all over the place. There's not one that is perfect. Theory is about explaining possibilities, so use different things. And remember, all behavior is communication. Did you know that what is said and what is not said is communication? And sometimes I speak to, recently somebody asked me something. She's in my category, yes. I'm menopausal and proud. And there are many persons who have challenges, some of my menopausal colleagues, because our bodies change and, the woman will be dying. And she says nothing. She's uncomfortable. So the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Here are 6 things that couples quarrel about. Nothing is number 1. Money, housework, sex, extended family, that's the in-laws, and a new baby. This is one study. Here's another one that shows you some other things that people quarrel about. Cultural violence, sex is number 2. Poor communication skills, the inability to handle conflict, personality differences, loss of trust. When somebody goes outside of a relationship, even if it's somebody who is not married, it's very hard for somebody to get back that trust. The unwillingness to, and the inability to forgive. Sometimes people have had bad experiences and just one thing triggers the thought. And, you know, the person is gone again. She remembered how, you know, so she's in a good relationship, but then she remembers that she had a friend who was, you know, unfaithful, and then that became a problem. Growing up in an abusive family. Now, one of the things about couples, and this is something that all of us did as we seek to wind up, there are 4 broad premarital factors that contribute to marriage quality, and only one I'm looking at. We talk, you know, there's family background, individual characteristics, social context. How a couple communicates, relates to another, and resolve conflicts is the most critical factor that predicts marital success or distress. And so we get into, you know, well, there's a text, Ephesians 4:31-32, get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, brawling, slander. And in the end, we are being told, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as Christ forgave you. Now, conflict is inevitable in all relationships. We don't always see things the same way. We don't always believe or respond to things the same way. And so I want us to consider, we won't be able to go into all of them, what is your conflict style? You know, some people lock down when there's a conflict. They're not talking, they're vexed, and they're not saying anything, and that's the response. Some, you know, but collaboration is the one that is deemed the best, where we are talking, we are giving, you know, possibilities in terms of how to respond. And this is a conflict resolution model where we look at concerns, we talk, we identify the needs, and then in the end. But here we are. And I'm just giving some ideas. You may know some as we wrap up. How do we recognize red flags? And when do we decide that it is time to maybe move on? And I'm just giving a few. When conflict is a way of life. Every day, everything. You say good morning and a fight. And sometimes it's physical. And you have some persons, they are Scotch bonnet in nature. They will say some real rough things, and males do it, females do it. When there is abuse, and, you know, I know sometimes the church will come in and say certain things, and this sometimes even happens before people are married. But there are different types of abuse. There's physical, there's verbal, there's economic. I'm thinking if that is going to be the way of life, sometimes it ends in death, and we don't want that. When there's consistent dishonesty, and some people, lying is their middle name. They lie for different things, and the person has to be constantly doing things. So if there's constant dishonesty, and, you know, as we're not getting into all the details, when there is lost emotional connection or no emotional connection, and sometimes, sadly, this happens even with people. There's somebody who the man has just got up one day and disappeared. They had no argument, but obviously something went wrong, and he just decided the way to deal with it was to leave. I'm not saying, but sometimes it's not worth salvaging. And as we finish, when goals don't align, and when disturbing behaviors are revealed, and there are some real sick behaviors, and sometimes we're trying to not see it, and we're trying to fix the person, but males do it, females do it. And when the partner insists that you do things you are not comfortable with. For me, these are just some of the situations that may be red flags, and we may have to see our way out. So we close with our text. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such, there is no law.
Hitch or hike. And while I was listening, I heard some reasons why we can hitch and work on it. But we also heard some red flags, some more serious issues that maybe you might have to take a hike. I'm listening to the presentation. Dr. Vernal, you said something I want to ensure I'm getting the wording correctly. You said the single biggest problem that relationships face with communication is the illusion that it happened. What do you mean by that?
Sometimes persons are thinking that what was said, and you know, sometimes I'll pull on my own, you know, I have no challenge with that. Sometimes I'm saying something to my husband, and as far as I'm concerned, I told him what I wanted to say. Yeah. And you know, many times when I get couples together, and we are being real. Because one of the challenges, my brother, is that we are very cliche and we are very unreal. And sometimes when I'm talking to couples and I'm saying, do we talk about, and I go to the one that many of us are afraid to talk about. It's sweet and nice, but we don't want to talk about it. Sex. Which is sometimes the one that causes the biggest problem, because the man might be not fulfilling in pics and in dog getting it, cat getting it, and because he's not, but he will not say, and I've spoken like to individuals who are menopausal and andropausal. And that's where many times some people break up. Because of what is not happening naturally, it becomes uncomfortable to be intimate. And the persons don't talk. They'll be, they're just saying, Lord, please let him finish quick so I can go to, And they're terrified. And I remember when I made a presentation, the sister come to me and she said, Sister Vernal, no, I realize something I'm mad. And she's going back to her husband. Because she says her husband is loving and kind, but he's starting to wonder if she has somebody else, because every time he makes a move, she's finding a reason not to. So I say to couples from early, long before, and I never speak to menopause without having men there. Because the men may say, but my wife just changed overnight. But when he realizes that she's going through a challenge, they may need to go to the doctor. Sometimes the answer is right there in the pharmacy. Sometimes the answer is in the house. But because we don't talk, the relationship deteriorates. And there are other things too, where somebody makes a big decision, but it was not discussed with the partner. That's right. And the person figures that he or she is insulted, disrespected, and the relationship is in trouble.
Guys, if you realize a very interesting conversation is happening, let me say good evening to Marjorie McKenzie and Joycelyn Catwell, saying great presentation, enjoyed that one just now. I'm seeing some questions coming in, and that's what I want you to know. If you're watching on YouTube, whichever other platforms you're watching on, you can drop your questions in the chat. We have producers who are monitoring, and they will be posing those questions. Dr. Vernal, be prepared. I've seen some questions in the chat already. Classic Roy Brown. Yeah. Tajel, what's happening on that side? Yeah. Tajel and Truston, they have been monitoring the Zoom room, the official registered place that persons are joining us from. And for all those individuals who are watching on that side, remember, you're getting your certification and everything. Let me try once more. Tajel, are you ready? If not, I am going to a break. We have a short break, and we continue with the presentations on the other side. So, Tajel, let me try. Yeah.
From opals and diamonds come rubies and jades.
Calling all boys and calling all girls. CJC Jewels, go brighten your world. Yay!
Yes, little ones, it is your very own friendly children's online church right here at Central Jamaica Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. I know you will enjoy Exploration Station and Jewels Showcase. Tell all your friends to join us. See you there.
It's fast approaching. Debates of wit, skillful maneuvering, pivoting, and overall excitement.
As it relates to all of that, Mr. Speaker, trust me, it is there.
Yes, on October 16, 2023 at 8:30 a.m., log on to the NCU DCS TV YouTube channel and feast on some scintillating debates as the NCU Invitational Debate Series. You will see teams such as NCU, UTEC, University of West Georgia, Spelman College, University of West Indies Western Jamaica Campus, Monique College, Montego Bay Community College, and more. Sponsored by official media partner, the NCU Media Group. Motion sponsors, Tax Administration Jamaica, Ministry of National Security, and Jamaica Public Service. Prizes by Creative Content Freelancing Services, BMC Photography JA, Tax Administration Jamaica, Helpmates Housekeeping and Essential Services, Jamaica Public Service, Live Good, and NCU Thai Center. Refreshments provided by Zappy's Organics, Najante Restaurant and Lounge, and Rary's Pastries and Cafe. It's the NCU Invitational Debate Series, October 16, 2023 at 8:30 a.m. on YouTube at NCU DCS TV. Do not miss it.
All right, welcome back to all those, especially if you're just getting a chance to tune in. We are live over on YouTube at NCU TV Jamaica, also live on, we're also live over on Watch EJC live on NCU FM 91.1, 91.3, and 91.5. But this afternoon, this evening, I also want to say thank you to our sponsors, the Jamaica Customs Agency, Country Above Self, the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, PATH program, it's Advancing Your Family, Developing Jamaica. Also say a big thank you to Carla's Escape Day Spa. When inside, forget about outside. So we just heard a presentation talking about relationships, especially some love relationships, relationships between males and females. What about the other types of relationships that we are in on a daily basis? I'm talking about the relationships at work and at church and in your community. Well, our next presenter will address that.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed guest, Dr. Audrey Jean Allen. Dr. Allen is an accomplished industrial organizational psychologist with a wealth of experience and expertise. With over 20 years in human resource management and development, both in the public and private sectors, Dr. Allen has a profound understanding of workplace dynamics. She holds a master's degree in business administration, a postgraduate diploma in education and training, and is a certified educator and trainer. Dr. Allen's research interests span across emotional intelligence, leadership, and culture, making her a true authority in understanding workplace dynamics. She's an adjunct lecturer and an active member of prominent associations including the American Psychologist Association, Jamaica Psychology Association, JAMPSych, and the Human Resource Management Association of Jamaica, just to name a few. In her session today, Dr. Allen will be sharing insights on navigating difficult work environments, recognizing signs of a toxic workplace, and strategies for conflict resolution. We are truly honored to have Dr. Audrey Jean Allen here today, and her expertise promises to be invaluable as we explore these crucial aspects of workplace dynamics. Welcome.
All right, Dr. Allen, good evening and welcome. I am really anticipating this presentation, you know. Good evening.
Good evening, Michael, and good evening to all our participants this evening. I'm looking forward to sharing with you. So in this session, we're going to be looking at the toxic work environment. And for everyone, I'm sure at some point in our lives, we have all experienced that. What we hope to achieve this evening is to be able to identify what the toxic environment and to understand some strategies that we can use to manage ourselves in that environment, and if we need to exit, when we do so, and how we can manage that as well. So we will go into the presentation just now.
For us, what about some of these workplaces, what are some things that we need to look out for while we're in our various day-to-day lives?
Okay, so how are we going to be able to identify what a toxic work environment looks like? So it may be that it is one that you're not able to communicate effectively with your team leader. It may be one where feedback is not encouraged. It may be one where creativity is not encouraged as well. And so you will feel stifled and not be able to perform. It may be one filled with criticism and you are not able to have any discussions in relation to maybe your poor performance and being criticized constantly and not being able to access any remedial measures to help you to grow in the space.
The question is hitch or hike, right? At what point can we, what are some things that we'll be able to identify to let us know if this is a workplace, this is an organization, this is a group setting that I can stay and build with, or maybe I need to take a hike?
Right. So we will go through that in the session, and persons will be able to identify whether or not they're in a situation where they're feeling very uncomfortable and not being able to produce as they would like. All right. Yeah. And when we talk about an organization, as you said, it's anything with a group of persons. So it may be church, school, of course, a typical organization with departments, etc. So any group of persons that you're a part of, this is going to be classified as an organization in this session.
All right, so firstly, if you realize we're getting some definitions, exactly what we mean when we talk about organizations, and somebody is coming to the realization, maybe earlier saying, but Dr. Vernal, I am not in any relationship at home, I'm not married, so this workshop don't have anything to do with me. Well, now we're realizing that we are, all of us, in organizations. All right, Dr. Allen, what are some things that we need to look out for now? Yeah, as it relates to hitch or hike.
Okay, so we will share what it is that an environment that is toxic, what it looks like, the different descriptions in relation to being uncomfortable in the space sector. We will look at those. We will look at how we can maneuver ourselves in the space, what to look out for. We look at emotional intelligence as to how managers can help themselves as well as their team leaders to manage themselves in that space and to make it more effective for them to perform. So we will go into that because that is a very, very critical area that impacts very positively on performance within a toxic space.
Yeah. All right, yes, no problem. Go ahead, share with us.
Okay. Yeah. All right, thank you so much. All right, so I will share my screen. May I have privilege, please?
As I'm listening to Doc, and she was kind of introducing that, during this presentation, that word I'm hearing a lot. Toxic, toxic relationship. We're going to be able to identify some of those red flags and also understand what is required to change. Because here, we don't just want to talk about what is, but how can we be a part of the solution? Yes. Doc, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready to go.
All right, go ahead.
All right, thank you so much, Michael. All right, so as we said, we are going to be looking at the toxic environment and how we can maneuver ourselves in the space. All right. Now, at the end of the session, as I mentioned earlier, we are hoping to be able to identify, be more knowledgeable in relation to the factors that will result in a toxic environment. We will know the signs and dangers of a toxic workspace and be able to identify the different types of toxic cultures, because you have different types of toxic cultures. Understand what is required to change a toxic work culture, gain some knowledge of what you can do to survive, and understand when and how you can exit the space. All right. So what is a toxic work culture or work environment? And this is one where you feel psychologically unsafe. This is one where it is rife with hostility, mistrust, selfishness, and of course, lots of gossip and cliques in the space. It is usually a breeding ground for dysfunction due to poor communication. So there is lack of effective communication, power struggles, a lot of negativity, and abusive relationships in relation to your leaders, right? There is often a general feeling of negativity, unhealthy competition, and a lot of aggression in the space. And of course, what allows the space to be toxic? It is going to be the people within the space. So these persons that are causing toxicity, they defy logic. And so some persons may even be unaware of how negatively they're impacting persons around them. Others seem to derive satisfaction from creating chaos. They just like to have, they dwell on building chaos in the space and pushing other persons' buttons all the time. A lot of disagreements. They create unnecessary complexity, strife, and stress. Okay? And studies have long shown that stress, of course, we know stress can have a lasting negative impact on our brain, right? And when we talk about the stress on our brain, exposure to even a few days of stress can impact on the neurons in our hippocampus, that is in our brain, an important brain area that is responsible for reasoning and memory. And so the stress will impact on our level of reasoning and memory as well. And of course, now with that, weeks of stress can cause irreversible damage to the dendrites that brain cells use to communicate with each other. And months of stress can permanently destroy the neurons. So you see how critical it is for us to recognize toxicity, because a lot of stress will result from it. And it's going to threaten your success within the workspace. It's going to impact on your brain, and it will allow you to get out of control. Now, recent research studies define a toxic workplace with the following signs. So if it is that you see any of these, I'm not going to go into all of them because it's quite a long list, you will be able to identify or recognize that this is a toxic space. Narcissistic behavior, offensive or aggressive leadership, harassment, constant harassment, bullying, threatening behavior from managers and co-workers. So we're not only talking about the leaders, we're talking about team leaders in the space as well. A sabotaging boss who sets you up for failure, no support from your boss all the time. And you say, you hear the terminology, throw you under the bus. There's no support when you have a challenge. There's no support, no guidance in relation to dealing with that challenge. Excessive gossip, harassment or discrimination, unsafe working conditions, just to highlight a few. Cutthroat working conditions, there is a lot of jealousy within the space, jealous of other person's success or other co-workers who try to make you look bad or take credit for your work. And during my work life, and I'm sure for some of us, we have encountered this kind of environment. There is also a lack of respect in the space, unrealistic workloads. You're constantly being given assignments and you're overwhelmed. Non-constructive criticisms. You are not, although you're being criticized, there's no help in relation to allowing you to improve on your performance.
All right. As we're listening to Dr. Allen talking about some of the things we need to look out for in the various organizations that we are a part of, Quite an interesting conversation thus far. If I look over to some of the comment areas, I am seeing, is it Aldane? Adeline Xavier, seeing an interesting presentation, listening from Dominica. I also see some questions coming in. Dr. Vernal, it looks like we're going to have a hot question and answer segment for you, you know. A lot of fake persons, somebody is saying, a lot of fake persons can be in the workplace as it relates to a place that, you know, might be even so full of gossip if we're not careful.
Yes.
What I'm seeing. Oh boy. Yes, Doc, go ahead.
All right, so I continue. Thank you, Mike. All right, so we have different types of toxic cultures, okay? The first one we're going to look at is the hustle culture. That is one most normalized cultures in workplaces. Oftentimes, you have micromanagement at the core of this culture. This profit-driven culture is known to exploit workers by having them work longer hours without little in return, right? So we hope we don't have any of those here, but that culture does exist, and that is a type of toxic culture. The second type of toxic culture is called a clique culture. And this is the opposite of an inclusive culture because it creates an environment where people aren't comfortable being their authentic selves. This is due to a lack of protection from management and HR in regards to inappropriate jokes, etc., being made around probably race, your religion, weight, age, gender, etc. So this is a clique culture. And they give persons, they look at these areas and more or less mock persons. And so you're going to feel uncomfortable in the space. The blame and every worker for themselves culture stops at the top. And this is to do with the leadership of the organization. When leadership refuses to take accountability by placing in place, it establishes a precedence that mistakes are bad and unwelcome, so you can't do anything wrong. You're penalized as nobody accepts responsibility for fear of being reprimanded, losing their job, or looking bad. And of course, this is going to cripple your creativity in the space, right? Authoritative culture, power and control are at the core of this type of culture. And in this space, you're going to have bullying, discrimination being very, very rampant. And authoritative culture is filled with favoritism, nepotism, and yes man or yes woman. Okay, you cannot give your own opinion, and so there is this space where you feel that you cannot express yourself freely. All right, and the fifth type of toxic culture is fear-based culture. In healthy workplace cultures, employees are encouraged to respectfully challenge processes and anything that isn't working, procedures, policies, etc. But in a fear-based culture, employees are silenced by intimidation, abuse, gaslighting, and domination. And one of the most toxic workplace cultures it is because it creates harsh working environment. Employees will do everything they can to avoid punishment, including not taking risks or cutting corners. So these are the 5 types of toxic cultures. But how does a toxic culture affect our mental health? And most recently, even more so since COVID, workplaces are focusing heavily, including our Ministry of Health, focusing heavily on mental health. And of course, if it is that you spend your entire day in a space filled with toxicity, it is going to impact on your mental health, right? Research studies show that a toxic workplace is a significant source of psychological strain for employees and can lead to high levels of stress and burnout. So if you're not comfortable in the space, if it is that based on the previous slides where we highlighted some characteristics of the space, if you're experiencing those, there's cause for concern and you need to examine that. This toxicity can impact on your level of productivity as well and your success. It can promote counterproductive behavior at work and actually ruin the efficiency, your efficiency, and in the long term, that of the organization. Of course, in this space, what results is the disengagement of employees. This disengagement, decrease in productivity, I mentioned before, stifling of creativity and innovation. Persons do not want to make suggestions and give feedback. And of course, if it is that you're being stifled based on the lack of being able to express yourself and create, you're going to not want to be in an environment such as this. And what happens eventually, you'll have a high level of turnover within the space. A recent MIT Sloan Management Review says a toxic workplace culture is over 10 times more likely to contribute to an employee quitting their job than low pay, believe it or not. The report shows that a toxic environment was #1 reason why people left their jobs during the post-COVID-19, the Great Resignation. And so we heard about that concept where persons just got up and decided to leave their jobs without even looking at, what they're losing, not looking at pay, etc. They just wanted to be in a more comfortable space. Now, how do we deal with a toxic work environment? The first thing we need to do is to remember it is not your fault. You have not contributed to this, right? The negativity that you are seeing is not as a result of anything that you would have done. That's the first thing. And although having a positive attitude and a collaborative mindset may help in certain conditions, remember there is only so much you can do and no more, right? So make sure you manage your time well in this space. Take your lunch breaks. You may want to go for a walk, sit outside, set boundaries, and persons, you're not to allow persons to bully you in relation to skipping lunch. Make sure you take your breaks, manage your time well. In relation to working hours, if it is that you don't need to work late, don't do that. But you have to have communication with your supervisor so that they can understand where you are. Don't get involved in gossip in the space. That is only going to make matters worse for you, right? Try to walk away from drama and gossip. Stay focused on your goals. So you would have had your personal goals. Keep them in mind. Do your best to stay in a positive state of mind. In relation to after work, find something to motivate you. Have an after work ritual, right? Do something after work to clear your mind of the negativity. Take a walk, exercise, get involved with some nature activity, a hot shower, or just have a conversation with a friend. Just find something to do after work so that you can relax and remain motivated. You may want to have a few trustworthy co-workers as well. There may be some within the space. Keep a few good work allies because you're going to need the support, right? You're going to need someone to confide in at some point. Don't compromise your values. If someone at work is being cruel to you, do your best to not respond in kind. All right? Do not respond in kind. That is going to only make the matters worse. And of course, escalation is going to be involved. And we don't want to get to that point. Engage in regular stress coping techniques. Take up meditation, yoga, some spiritual activities. Engage in daily exercise to help you handle chronic stress. And of course, while you're doing all of this, you're going to have a plan in place. Have a plan to exit. If the workspace isn't going to improve anytime soon, it is only going to result in you having to search for a new position. But you have to have a plan in place because we know these things don't happen overnight. So plan your strategy to exit the space. How do we improve a toxic work environment? And based on the discussions that we have had so far, we recognize that a toxic environment is detrimental to our mental and physical health. And if it is that we remain in the space, it can lead to high stress levels. We're going to have a poor level of poor self-esteem. And of course, we're going to be very depressed. If the toxicity comes from leadership or is a company mindset, of course, we may not be able to do much about that. However, if it is coming from one or two persons, you can discuss the issue with a trusted manager or speak with someone in HR to get some help to manage that situation. Your company may hire outside help because they may have a health and wellness program. You may have an employee assistance program in place, the EAP, to help persons to resolve the problems. And of course, these programs allow you to be able to make contact with counselors, etc. If you have no other option but to stay for now, try to pull yourself in a positive space. And as I said earlier, you are going to focus on your goals. Focus on your goals outside of work and start making plans to exit. Now, we talked about leadership earlier, and we recognize that leadership impacts on the culture of the organization. And if it is that our leaders are able to exhibit emotional intelligence competencies, the culture would reflect one where persons are free to give feedback, communicate more effectively, show a high level of empathy, and be able to create in the space. There's a lot of flexibility, and so persons are able to perform well. Now, the leaders set the tone of the organization, but if they lack emotional intelligence, it could have more far-reaching consequences, and this will result in lower employee engagement and a higher turnover rate within the organization. And so this diagram says the leader has EI. Of course, you're going to work towards your individual team members having those competencies as well. And it's going to impact on personal and organizational goals within the space. So it is very, very important that leaders look at the level of EI competencies, emotional intelligence competencies that they possess with a view of improving those competencies and extending them to their team leaders. Now, just a quick thing, just to look at EI, because we're not going to go into that too much, but EI is a very, very critical concept. Daniel Goleman, who developed a book, well, he authored a book in relation to emotional intelligence, and he suggested that there are 5 key elements: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. And these will impact on how persons behave in the space, resulting in a more comfortable space for leaders and team members. Leadership cannot exist without strong relationships. And so this is going to enable persons to build relationships in this space. An emotionally intelligent leader can develop and maintain relationships that are built on trust. And of course, the lack of trust is a very critical element that exists in a toxic space. And so being competent in AI will address that. They appreciate how other people feel, and they know and understand their team's hidden strengths. And so the leaders will be able to communicate better, to engage their team members, and just encourage higher level of performance within the space, making persons feel more comfortable. They're free to share their opinions, etc., and to be creative. Skills that enable them to motivate and engage others, driving performance and ultimate organizational success. So it's very, very important, as I said, for leaders to recognize this and to build on their AI competencies. While you may talk, yes, Michael. Go ahead.
Well, they're at it. I want to wrap you, but there is something that you said that I would want you to kind of explore a bit. As we're talking about hitch or hike, especially in an organizational setting, and I am sure we can also relate this to like another type of relationships. You said we should have a plan in place before we try to take that hike. Could you expound on that?
Okay, so you are going to be in this space and you are observing, you are managing yourself in the space, but at a point, you are going to want to exit based on the fact that if it is that you recognize that there is no change, and so in order to remain healthy, it is going to be your better option to exit the space. Yeah. And so what you would need to do, of course, you're going to start a job search, or if it is that you're going to go into a small business, start looking at that, but you start to make the plans, because based on the reason for the toxicity, you may not be able to change anything, or no one would be able to have an impact on the space, so to speak. So you may look at that and make some decisions in relation to whether or not, based on what is happening, am I going to remain to see how this turns out, or I'm going to say I can't take anymore, I'm going to exit the space. It may be, and it comes later on in the presentation, it may be that if something comes up, say the environment becomes violent or so, you may want to fast track the plans, right? And you may want to get other persons involved in relation to what is happening.
And that's exactly where I want to go, Doc.
Yes,
about getting other persons involved. I know we have our next presenter waiting, but getting other persons involved. What if the situation at work, when do we know when to take the issue to our human resource department? When should we maybe even get the police involved?
So I'm going to say this would have been happening with you. And I strongly suggest that you have a conversation with your supervisor initially, right? And of course, if it becomes unbearable, it is going to go to your HR. You're going to have that conversation with HR. And all of this will be based on how your grievance policy and so on, right? If it is that you're being sexually harassed, and of course, we have to be mindful of that, you're going to refer to there is a policy. You have to ensure that you make a list of what is happening, make a note, and communicate immediately with your HR. Or there may be a panel, a committee that you will have to make reference to. So be mindful of that. But if it is that the situation becomes unbearable and you are not able to function, if there's maybe a level of violence might come into the picture, you have to ensure that you communicate immediately with your HR. And it may be that you have to look outside in relation to getting the police involved and so on. But it's going to be dependent on the level of uneasiness in this space. And so getting your HR involved is going to be very, very critical.
Let me say thank you to Dr. Audrey Allen as we spoke about our relationships from the organizational level. While I was listening to the presentation, there was something that you said. A toxic workplace is a significant source as it relates to the placing psychological strain on employees, and it can actually lead to high levels of burnout. In the chat, yes. I saw, did I lose it? No, I don't think I would lose it, Michael. There we go. As John Winter is saying, a happy workplace, work environment equals a happy work staff, which can actually lead to an increase in productivity. As we're talking about mental health.
Beautiful.
You like that one? As we're talking about mental health and focusing on our emotional well-being, I wonder if there is a way that we could explore this as it relates to the nuance of relationships. Yes, in our personal relationships, also in our professional relationships. I know that the Ministry of Health and Wellness, they have been putting a big emphasis on this.
That's correct.
Joining us this evening, we have the Director of Mental Health and Substance Use at the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Dr. Kevin Goldburn. Dr. Goldburn is joining us. Dr. Goldburn, good evening and welcome to this discussion.
Good evening and thank you for having me and very informative discussion, and I'm very pleased because it is targeting areas that we find in mental health that is a great source of either relief or stress. That's relationships.
Dr. Goldburn, here's how I want to frame our conversation. We have heard about several things that can go wrong and several things that could go wrong in our various relationships, whether personal or professional. Now that we're able to identify some of these red flags, I'm looking at my chat and I'm seeing persons saying, they know persons who are going through some of these very similar and tough situations. Can we talk some solutions, especially for us here in Jamaica? Let's say maybe some counseling services. Does the ministry have counseling services in place? And could you tell me about some of them and how can we access them?
Yes, indeed, we have counseling services, and we have it at the adult mental health clinics and also at the child and adolescent mental health clinics, which are dispersed across the island. And one can always make referral to these clinics. And we get referrals from the schools, from workplaces, from private doctors, from other clinicians who refer persons to get counseling. And then we have psychologists that can provide counseling. Also, we have access virtually because we know some persons may not want to go to a mental health clinic as an initial means of getting some contact with help. So we do have online, we have a national mental health and suicide prevention helpline where persons can call 24 hours per day, 7 days per week, and then they can speak to a counselor. I mean, especially this is a very useful means for especially men, because men are not health seeking in their general behavior. So it could be a way where men can actually get this help initially through these psychologists who can give initial counseling. And if needs be, then this person can get for a referral if the telephone counseling is not enough. And the number for that line is 888-639-5433 or 888-NEW-LIFE. Now we know the adolescent may have problems too, because we have to realize that a lot of persons who attempt suicide from our statistics are among young females, 10 to 19 years old. And we do have a UMATA chat line where youngsters can actually text or send SMS messages to this number. And there, again, we have counselors waiting that can respond by text. And the number for that is 876-838-4897. And then there's also, for younger children, what we call a safe spot, where, again, they can either call or they can text or send snapshot or IG messages to the number 876-439-5199. As mentioned by one of the presenters, not only persons may have mental issues, but they may also resort to using substances. So we also have substance use counseling line available at 876-564-HELP or 564-4357. And these services, as I mentioned before, are island-wide, and they are free to the public to make access to these counseling services.
I love the use of the various media that we're able to get in contact and make access some of these services. I know that in a bit, some of these numbers, maybe you missed them, they'll be coming up on your screen somewhere thereabout, just as a bit of a refresher. As we talk to Dr. Goldburn, in the context of our theme today, hitch or hike, to either stay or you have to move on. Does access to and also making use of these various mental health support facilities, having good mental basis in mental health, how does it contribute to healthier interpersonal relationships, both at home and also at the workplace?
Well, just to have someone to speak to communicate your concerns, just ventilate is initial help. So some persons, especially in our society, when persons are busy about making life, sometimes they just need someone to listen to them, to be able to can appreciate what they're going through and can empathize with them. So it's an initial step where persons may have someone willing to listen, willing to provide support, even before even giving advice, just to further challenge you able to listen and can validate your concern about your relationship, which may not be going well, whether it's at home or at work. And then this allows the person to be able in a better space emotionally, being understood, being validated by someone else, and they can better have a clear mind as to how they're going to proceed, whether to remain hitch or to hike.
Yes. And as we talk, could you share some more insights into maybe some of the types of challenges and situations where individuals might benefit from counseling services?
So what we have found is that a lot of persons call about interrelationship problems. That's been a big issue for them. There are also issues related to financial issues. And especially out of COVID-19, a lot of persons may have issues with job losses, situation with interruption of school situation. They have other issues as to do with work situation where they find it hard to get jobs into their career path. The career path has been disrupted, and they have been calling, really distressed about it and wanting assistance in dealing with these situations. And a lot of persons, really financial problems are a big issue affecting them, especially post-COVID, where some persons have lost job. Of course, there's an issue about grief and loss, because so many persons will have lost loved one over the COVID period, and now, especially now, it is now becoming much more pronounced that the loss is great because of the impact it has not only on the personal loss, but the consequence of these losses of these loved ones. So suddenly, so you find that all these challenges are being called in by these persons to seek assistance to help them to navigate these challenges that they have been facing.
Mm-hmm. You know, I'm listening to you and I'm wondering, we hear all of these. Yes, we should have a strong mental health backing and why it's important. But are there any practical ways? Could you talk to our viewers and our listeners right now? What are some ways that we can help to maintain strong mental capacity, mental health, and how that can positively impact our relationships? And you know, you mentioned men. You know, maybe we need to seek support. You know, talk to us.
Yes. So one of the things that we have been trying to do in the Ministry of Health is really trying to deal with the whole issue of stigma, and stigma in all different areas, at home, at school, within workplace, within the health facilities. So trying to help to decrease the stigma. And you may see different media messages where we're trying to help persons to be aware that you're not alone, that there are other persons who have similar illnesses that you have, and that we need to share. Not only we need to share what we are going through, but we need to also listen. So we speak about speak up, speak now. I'm not about asking person to listen. So we want to develop a greater sensitivity within the society that mental illness is no respect of persons, whether you're from a high socioeconomic status, meaning that you are fairly rich or poor, where you're urban area or you're in the rural area, that all persons are likely to have mental health issue at some point in time. But what one person to be aware of: one, help is available. Two, that is treatable. That persons can have mental health issues and treated adequately, and they can recover and return to productivity, whether it's at school, at work, within their family setting. So trying to help persons to realize services available, just for them to access. I'm trying to decrease the stigma towards that person will feel more comfortable approaching for mental health services. And I think it is decreasing. I've had person coming to my office and coming to our system where they're actually coming just to check up because they're concerned about how they're feeling, how they're behaving, and they're wondering if they're mentally unwell.
That's good. And that's where I kind of would want to wrap it up. Here in Jamaica, what are you finding that persons are actually thinking about their mental health and seeing that as something that is important?
Yes, I think so. I think that we are not fully there, but we are getting a decrease in stigma, and people are more aware of the mental health issues. I mean, we get lots of calls from workplaces, because workplaces themselves, private and public, are calling also give talk to their staff members, because we realize that if you don't take care of the staff mental health, it affects productivity. And schools, similar situation, where more and more calls have been made to us, so that we can't find enough hands to provide per person to present to these different situations. Health fairs, similarly, increased call for us to be a part of the dialogue, realizing that mental health is very important. And as I said, there's no good health without good mental health.
That's right.
So we find that we have been improving in the way persons have been seeing mental health, seen that being a very integral part in to address it and address it adequately, and to try to embrace the fact we may become mental unwell at some point in time, but there's help available, and help can be available in an adequate fashion that you can recover.
Let's say a big thank you to Dr. Kevin Goldburn. Dr. Goldburn is joining us, the Director of Mental Health and Substance Use at the Ministry of Health and Wellness. I also want to say a big thank you to our sponsors, the Jamaica Customs Agency, Country Above Self, the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, their PATH program, Advancing Your Family, Developing Jamaica, and Carla's Escape Day Spa. When inside, forget about outside. And even as we're talking about, I think for some of us, it would be a nice place to go and de-stress. De-stress. We have some questions. I want to feature some of your questions, and I tend to find when it comes to our workshops that we get a lot of questions for the person joining me in studio, and I realize that. But let me start off with Dr. Goldburn. Dr. Goldburn, somebody was saying when you were giving out those numbers, they weren't listening so well. Asking you to repeat some of those numbers, as we'll also put them up on screen.
So the National Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Helpline, 888-639-5433. I remember New Life. The one for adolescent is 876-838-4897. And we call You Matter chat line. And then there's one for children called 439-5199. Area code 876. And for substance use help, you can call 564-4357 or 564-HELP.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Looking in the chat right now, Marcia Williams is saying thank you. Great presentation. Maxine is saying excellent and relevant presentations. Thank you all. You ready for me to go to some of your questions? Tajel, are you there? Get ready to come in and help me with some of the questions, Tajel. But Dr. Vernal is with me. Dr. Vernal, I saw this question, and I am wondering about the question myself. I read the question as is, and then maybe I can add something to it. From the chat, it's saying, what are the signs that the person you're in a relationship with that loves you for you and not your money? And maybe I could also add to it, what are some signs that somebody loves us in the first place? Or what are some signs of love in a healthy relationship?
Okay, so as I started out, and one thing I want to say to individuals, each relationship has to be judged on its own.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when we try to, and so I will not give a plaster response because I don't know the relationship, I don't know the dynamics, and that's the reality of relationships. Whether we're talking about marriage, family, there are so many variables that interplay. Yeah. And God has given us certain gifts. He has given us insight. You know, sometimes there are things that are
foresight.
Foresight. Yeah. There are some things that are just blatant. Yeah. And so, if you know, how do I know that somebody loves me? They're going to treat me with respect. You know, we are going to be intentional about communication. And as was said, all behaviors are communication. So sometimes not saying something is communicating. Somebody who is going to allow me to be myself. There are persons who get married and the person has to change how they dress, how they look. Yes.
Be a whole new person.
New person. Sometimes they have to drop certain relationships. Yeah. And so some people even think that this person wants me for him or herself alone. So, you know, getting rid of my family and my friends. So God has given us sense. And so there are some things that, you know, we have to think. And that's why we say to persons, it cannot just be, we're just into the, you know, the physical, and that's all it is about. You have to listen to the person. Some persons, when they talk, you know, when somebody's going to tell that, you know, I'm going to kill you and the children if you leave me. And a woman has to run and leave her children and, you know, hoping that he wouldn't really hurt the children and then go back for them when she could. So each relationship has to be treated on its own merit. So, look, you know, is this person, we encourage people to be genuine. When we're having conflicts, you know, we don't just criticize and tear down because we are human beings. We are going to, when two persons come together, and we are talking with persons who may be thinking of going into a relationship, even in our families, we're different temperaments, we're different personalities. We experience life differently. So people are going to see things different, you know? They're going to experience it differently. So even, you know, how do I know, first thing, you know, maybe how do I see love? What do I, you know, some theorists, for example, Mr. Chapman will tell you have a particular love language, you know, so that is one that some persons use, you know, do I want words of affirmation? Do I like physical things? Do I, you know, physical touch? You know, do I want to, you know, different, whatever the gifts are, you know? So it depends on you because some people like certain things. Some of us don't.
Yeah.
You know? And so somebody may be bringing plants to somebody and the plants are dying. The person does not into plants, you know? But maybe, and that's why I tell you, communication is key. Ask. And I tell persons, if we work on communicating better, if we listen to one another, we talk with one another, we, you know, do what and persons want to be done. You know? It's a lot. We can't do everything here.
I'm going to give you points for a twofer because my next question was also talking about red flags. I realize you mentioned some red flags. I want to bring Truston and Tajel in here. This next question, I'm going to leave it to them because young people have some questions too.
Yeah. Of course.
Truston, Tajel, good evening.
Oh, it's to me?
Yes. Yeah, we still haven't figured out that audio part. We're not hearing you, Tajel. And I know Tajel was trying. They wanted to ask a question. But let me ask a question on behalf of them. Some statistics were mentioned as it relates to divorce. And as a matter of fact, since I'm saying that, let me use the opportunity to go right into a giveaway. According to some statistics shared earlier, what is the percentage of relationships that end in divorce? What's the percentage of relationships that end in divorce? When I ask you the question, don't give away the answer, all right? What's the percentage of relationships that end in divorce? Go ahead for all those who are using the various like YouTube channels. Give your answers in the YouTube chat. We also have the WhatsApp line up and running, 457-1414. I have the prize right here in front of me. Dr. Vernal, ready. So let's say, why so many marriages end in divorce? if everything was nice and dandy and perfect before the wedding day?
And I guess it depends on what we determine to be nice and dandy and perfect, because sometimes the intricacies of relationship, it may be, you know, it's so new and somebody showing so much attention and we are planning for this big day, and this is why, you know, persons have to discuss everything and prepare, enrich, you know, other counselors and so forth. They come up with programs where we look at our personalities, we look at areas that sometimes we are not comfortable talking about, budgeting. Some people, when they get married, afterwards they get married, they start to think about how many children they're going to have. Some women, as soon as they get married, they decide that they're not going to bother to work, they're going to school. And the man is expected to finance it. You understand me? There are many things that we don't discuss. So it looked hunky-dory before, but this is why we are saying be intentional.
Yes.
Dr. Gordon would say, you know, relational health. You have to have a healthy relationship. Some people before, you know, even if they have a conflict, they swallow it. They don't say it. They don't really say how they feel. And, you know, you will learn that healthy relationships, you're not going to destroy the relationship if you're having a conflict. But some persons, it's afterwards. So before, and they're saying, okay, I'm going to get married. So they don't show their true selves. Bridget, we can, sorry, I was saying Bridget. Michael, we can be great actors and actresses.
That's true.
And pretend before and everything is okay and nice. And after and I've seen it happen so many times. So this is why going and talking about things, and not only talking about the wedding, talking about life after the wedding, because there's so many, you're talking about being real.
Yeah.
We watch movies, they get up in the mornings and there's turnover and kissing
no
face or break, oh my goodness. But real life, that is not so.
Yeah.
That's not so. And, you know, you may have a wife who goes and credits all over the place, and you see people at the gate in the early morning waiting for the bill to be paid. Or you may have a man who does, you know, he goes and he does certain things, and no, you're just learning.
Family, yeah.
So when you're going into a relationship, go with your eyes open. Ask the hard questions. Go to somebody who can help you, because that's what some of the persons, you know, who do marriage preparation, they'll ask the hard questions.
You know, and when you were talking about that, you say, if we should even go into that before we even have a date. You know, we have a winner. We have a winner as I'm looking over on the YouTube channel. According to the statistics, what is the percentage of relationships that end in divorce? I'm seeing some 40%, 35%, 70%. Janet Richards, who was not only the first person to respond, but the first person with the correct answer. Janet said 40 to 50%. So congratulations, Janet. Head on over to our WhatsApp line. Janet, everybody have WhatsApp. WhatsApp 457-1414. Send us a WhatsApp message right now. We're having our producers reaching out to you. And before I close, one more giveaway. For this one, I'm going to be looking for the answer over on EJC's YouTube channel. Watch EJC Live. List 2 signs of toxic culture bullying. We heard that in the presentation earlier. List 2 signs of toxic culture bullying. Go ahead and answer. While you're answering, Dr. Vernal, this one is a very heavy question. What advice would you give to someone who is in a marriage where the other spouse is basically saying they want to take a hike? They are not in it anymore. They are not feeling the love anymore. They want a divorce.
Wow. You know, it took 2 persons to go into the relationship. And at least this person is expressing that he or she wants out. And it is really heart-rending. But, you know, sometimes if you can't force people. If the person is willing to try, and there are many experts who are there who can help with therapy. And the thing about therapy and counseling, they're awesome, but the persons can't tell you what to go and do. You have to decide in the end. And some relationships, you pray, you fast, you do everything. There are persons who would say that they gave the partner every single thing he or she wanted and the person wanted out. So I'm going to say if there is still the possibility, because it has happened where persons have expressed that. Sometimes it's out of anger, sometimes it's out of a situation and the person becomes flustered. But if the person is still willing to maybe get help, because the reality is sometimes we need more than what we know, prayer and fasting and all of those. We need God. But sometimes we need an expert to help us, because many times when people are arguing and they are not hearing the other person, they're not seeing the challenges, and sometimes the challenges can be so overwhelming. The person says, okay, better give up this than continue. So it's going to depend on the couple. Sometimes, you may expose the person to maybe even something like this, what you're having here.
Yeah, workshop.
Open it and play it loud that the person can hear. And maybe, if the person really wants the relationship, I'm talking about the person who is reaching out.
Yes.
See if you can appeal, and say to the person, let's try again. Because sometimes, not trying to give an applause, but sometimes things reach to where it is because of both people contributing to the situation. And, sometimes it's the in-laws and the outlaws and all sorts of things happening. So it depends on the situation to see if there's anything that can be salvaged.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm telling you, we learned a lot today. Thank you to all those who had your questions. Let me see if I have a winner for that next one as yet. Thank you to all those who had their comments. I saw some really powerful comments as it relates to our relationship, saying, that family prayer altar, we need to be using it up. The family that prays together stays together. Over on EJC, watch EJC live. Susan, I see a Susan there. I'm also seeing some Marcia. We will talk about WhatsApp 457-1414. Yeah, go ahead with and contact us right now, as our producers will be talking to you. Today, I must say thank you to all our listeners, everybody who is over on the FM frequencies, 91.1, 91.3 and 91.5 on NCU FM. Thank you to our viewers, those on the various YouTube channels, Watch EJC Live, and also on NCU TV Jamaica. Thank you also to the East Jamaica Conference for helping us with this broadcast. Thank you very much to those who registered. You will be getting your certificates, and also I'm working on getting you a full copy of what happened this afternoon. Only for those who registered, though, all right? And I must say thank you to our presenters today, taking the time out to help us through discussing some of what we had here. Joining me in studio, Dr. Vernal, over on Zoom, Dr. Allen, thank you very much, and Dr. Kevin Goldberg. We have a production team here. Thank you to the production team. And, of course, thank you to our sponsors. Sponsoring today, the Jamaica Customs Agency, Country Above Self, the Ministry of Labor and Social Security's PATH program, Advancing Your Family, Developing Jamaica, and Carla's Escape Day Spa. When inside, forget outside. And Carla's Escape Day Spa, the company, the sponsor of, for all those who want in the questions, you will be going over to Carla's Escape, courtesy of them. Thank you very much. Listen, join me again next week for another workshop. We do this every quarter, so look out for what we are coming with next quarter in these Back to Basics workshops. Incidentally, there are 4 quarters in a year, and we have had 3 workshops thus far, so we have 1 more to wrap up the year. So look out for that one as we do that one in a very big way. Even some very simple topics, but bringing them across in new and interesting ways. Thank you, everybody. It is dinner time for me. Yes, an important part of my relationship. After work, I need to go home for my dinner. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy your evening and join us again next time for our another in this series, Back to Basics or workshops.